The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great.
Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome in. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Elliott Rearing, Jacob Tissa with you here. Casey McAllister holding it down over in the producer chair. And, happy Tuesday. Gentlemen, good morning. How are we today?
All right.
I feel great.
It was like 70 degrees yesterday when I left work.
Yeah,
that's great vibes. And then I expected it to be warm again this morning, and it wasn't. So
Yeah, I think is it going to get warm today, though?
it's supposed to get warmer. I think like at least mid-50s.
Let's see. Who want to take a guess? Anybody want to guess the high? Casey,
I
guess
just
your high.
saw it on my watch.
Jacob already saw it on his watch.
Is it 50-something?
56.
That's big time.
There we go.
We'll take that.
Snow in the forecast tomorrow.
Ah.
Whoopsie.
Nah.
Whoopsie.
That one hurts.
That's what I said. I get pissed when it's warm in February because we went through all that entire month of single digits so that I can get into the 30s and just be comfortable in the 30s for the rest of winter. But then they bring you into the 50s and 60s, and now the 30s are freezing. So I'm over it already. But anyways, time to get Jason Fitz gonna hang out with us here. He's at the Super Bowl. He's at Radio Row right now, so he's gonna hop on with us coming up here shortly. So we'll chat about the Super Bowl with him, and then a couple of NFL college football headlines as well. The Reds stink again. So we went from all these people telling us that we were crazy for being a little sour about the Reds, and then they got us to believe just so we could start to see the stuff coming out to remind us that the Reds might be bad. The Reds might be horrible, guys. In fact, last place is what some of the projections are showing. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah, and these are Elliott's favorite projections. These ones specifically.
I was going to say this.
Just like 35 different projections, 35 different answers. But sure, let's pick this one, which has the Cubs at 125 wins.
I mean, not bad. But yes, the Reds, not a great outlook. If you follow this model, which I don't even know what the name of it is, but it's
these
pretty
models are so stupid. Watch the games, and we'll figure it out at the halfway mark. It's just so dumb. Like people who are like, oh no, the PETA rankings just came out, and look, it's the Reds. They're dead last in the division to the Pirates. The Pirates are ahead of them. Oh, it's just everybody calm down and relax. This means absolutely jack squat. Nothing. It means nothing. And I'm tired of these projections that I keep seeing on my timeline, wasting my breath on them.
I really am pulling for Elliott to cuss on the show just once. I think when you say you're pissed off, I think that's the closest you've come to saying any word that is a little unfriendly.
Well, it's just like the fact that this like sparks even a debate is so stupid. It's like nobody knows anything, especially regarding the Cincinnati Reds, who might be the biggest question mark in Major League Baseball heading into this year. There's literally no way you could predict them to win 88 games, and you could predict them to win 73. There's such a large margin of mystery with the Reds this season, and nobody can accurately predict it. Nobody knows how many games anybody's going to play. Nobody knows anything. So let's just stop acting like we do, and we'll get on with this season.
Well, we're going to get into all of that coming up here in a bit, but I wonder how Elliott feels about it. That's what I'm just dying to know. Coming up here in a bit, but we got Fitzy coming up around the corner. Again, we appreciate you guys tuning in, hanging out with us today off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Elliott's fired up. He's ready to go. We're going to send it to him for headlines. Elliott's headlines.
Score updates, breaking news, local and national headlines. Whatever's going on in the world of sports, Elliott has you covered. Off the Bench brings you Elliott's headlines.
Whistle? Oh, he's got the whistle.
That's better. Much better.
Felt good today.
Oh, that felt fantastic. How about that? I love the hat today, Jacob.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's a special hat.
2010 Rose Bowl, first game I ever
Really?
watched, like really knowing what was going on.
Well, that's a pretty cool hat.
Thank you.
Headlines, not a ton yesterday. Headlines, college basketball, 16th ranked Kansas. They glide by 8th ranked Iowa State. Iowa State's now dropped a couple in a row, 69-52 that final. Virginia, they dismantle Pittsburgh 73-57. We got some bubble team drama there. Pittsburgh gets blown out at home. Tonight at 8:30, the Hoyas, they come to the Cintas Center to take on the Xavier Musketeers. Muskies, 8.5-point favorites at home. They are looking for revenge after losing the first game of the season to Georgetown earlier on. So that game tips off again at 8:30 tonight. I believe Reed Mouse will be in attendance for all you Xavier fans.
Ooh.
Good luck there. Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball has fired Pat Hoberg for sharing a betting account with a friend who bet on baseball and then deleted text messages to cover it up, allegedly.
Ironically, one of the best statistical umpires in baseball.
I was going to say, he was regarded as the best ball strike umpire in the league. He even had a perfect rated World Series game. There is a Twitter account dedicated to rating umpire scorecards. They grade them. His scorecard, consistently one of the best in the league. There was no evidence at all that Hoberg bet on or manipulated games. Now, my question to this would be, I feel like there was a similar story last year where a friend got involved betting,
Yeah.
but the other guy is still allowed to play baseball. Why is Pat not allowed to umpire baseball? If his statistics, which, by the way, we all have access to those numbers, are consistently the best in baseball, and there's no evidence that he manipulated games, how is he fired from his job? I don't understand it. Not really. If Shohei's still playing in the league, I don't completely understand why Pat Hoberg's not. But Major League Baseball will do whatever the hell it wants to do. So moving on.
That's a good point. I
Go
didn't
ahead.
really, I'm sorry. I didn't even think about that's a great point. I didn't think about the crossover and the similarity between what this is and what the situation was heading into last season, of course, with Shohei Ohtani. It's the same thing, basically. I mean, a little different, around the edges. But, yeah, that is strange that it just ultimately led to him being fired, especially because it's clear in every article there's no evidence of him physically betting on these games himself or altering the outcomes of games. Obviously, this is them trying to protect their shield and all this, but the same thing could have been with the face of baseball with Shohei Ohtani last year. Interesting, nonetheless.
Yeah, listen. If there was any evidence at all, any little inkling that this guy bet or tried to bet or knew about betting on baseball, then yeah, I'd agree to fire him. But they just said there's no evidence, so I don't understand. I don't understand it if we're going to be completely honest. But to each their own. Paycor. It is, if approved, the state of Ohio could provide up to 40% of the funding to renovate Paycor Stadium. How about that? Mike DeWine also proposing doubling the tax on sports wagering in the state of Ohio to establish a construction fund. Some interesting nuggets regarding that. So good for Paycor, and I guess good for Mike DeWine.
I wonder what Vivek thinks about that. Yeah.
NFL. Last night it was announced, Cooper Kupp shared it, that the Rams are trying to trade him away. So it looks like Cooper Kupp will not be a member of the Los Angeles Rams next season. Bengal?
More players should break that news.
I agree.
I like that, they obviously told him that was the route they were going to go, and then he had a chance to release that to the media. That should be, especially, a player like that who's done so much for a coach in a city and won a championship and a Super Bowl MVP, letting him break that news. I thought that was a pretty cool nugget. But I really don't know what Cooper Kupp gets on the open market. I mean, he had one of the greatest single seasons of all time for a wide receiver in the NFL. He's only had 2,000-yard seasons in his career, another one where he had about 975. He was very close, but this isn't a guy with a long list of seasons where he was an elite receiver in the NFL, and he's been injured the last couple of years, and he wants to go to a contender, so that also limits your amount of teams. I don't know what he gets. I would imagine it's a mid-round pick. Casey and I were talking about it before the show, something around a third, maybe a third and a late-round pick, third and a sixth, something like that. But I don't think Cooper Kupp's getting some kind of massive return for the Rams.
No, and I saw the cap hit that teams would take as well. So it would be a lot of money. It would be a lot of money for a guy that did absolutely nothing in the back half of last season, or this past season, I guess I should say. It would be interesting. It would certainly be interesting if you would move on from T. Higgins and you would take on that. It doesn't make much sense to me, but if we want to add him on to everything, sure, I'll take Cooper Kupp as wide receiver 3. That sounds
what's
good.
$120 million to 3 guys if you can just do like $150 million to 4 guys?
Sure, let's do it. Let's do it. Those are your headlines.
Travis Kelce said yesterday at the first day of Super Bowl media that he has a lot of football left in him, said he thinks he could play the game, quote, forever. So obviously not a realistic timeline there as Father Time comes at some point.
Forever
is
not realistic.
I think that might at least put to rest the retirement after the game conversation, but I'm sure people will still talk about it.
Yeah, Taylor Swift must really love attending these games. That's my guess. I mean, she's having a
They just
blast.
love Kansas City so much.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Other Chiefs news too, by the way. It come out I think yesterday or the day before that Andy Reid will return as head coach for the Chiefs in 2025 as well. So
Thought they were going to fire him.
yeah. Well, retirement.
I know.
You know, and rumors of Eric Bieniemy, you know, just coming back to leave to be a head coach for the Chiefs out of nowhere. So there's that. But other news too. We're going to get Roger Goodell addressed the media yesterday as well, and of course they threw everything at him. We'll have some sound bites from him coming up later on in the show. But one thing he did announce, and I don't know what you guys think of this, just I know we talked about it last summer when we were talking about the Olympics with flag football, which is coming to Los Angeles in 2028. But Roger Goodell announced that the NFL is looking into implementing a professional flag football league for both men and women. What do you guys think about that?
I think this is probably the first step in eliminating NFL players from playing in the Olympics, right?
Yep.
You get an NFL-sanctioned flag football league, and you let all the flag football guys play in the Olympics, then you don't have to worry about injuries for your star players. Goodell said when this was all announced that they were going to try to figure out how to get NFL players to play. Obviously, Jalen Hurts in the commercial, a lot of guys talking about how bad they wanted to play in this. I never thought it made that much sense for the NFL. I don't think that playing a completely different sport makes a lot of sense for the league. And I know it's still football, but it's not NBA playing Olympic basketball. It is a different sport, at least to a degree. I think they're going to try to find a way to prevent NFL stars from playing in this game, and the way to do that is probably institute an NFL flag football league by 28.
Again, this is just another way to, I guess, try to make money for the NFL. Once they see the idea of flag football, they'll just steal it and make it their own. I have a hard time believing, though, guys in the NFL are going to want to play NFL-sanctioned flag football.
I would imagine it's not NFL players.
You think
they're going to make a league, NFL flag football, for flag football players. Remember the guy that played flag football and talked about how he's better than Patrick
No,
Mahomes?
I remember that.
I think those guys are the ones he's talking about.
Yeah, it's
flag football stars.
Yeah, it's just strange to me. I'd certainly never want to watch it, but to each their own, I guess.
All right, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Yeah, that quarterback you talked about, Jake, he threw like a sidearm. It was one of the, I mean, Tim Tebow was laughing at his throwing style. I mean, that's how questionable it was. But we'll get to more of that coming up. Roger Goodell had some other interesting things to say that we'll get to coming up here shortly. All right, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. Casey McAllister holding it down in the producer chair, and he has let us know that our guest is ready to go from Radio Row, attending the Super Bowl, of course. We'll get to Jason Fitz with Yahoo Sports when we come back. All right, and we are back. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. Shout out to our guy Casey in the producer chair. We got plenty more to dive into coming up. Let's get to our next guest. Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports, is joining us this week from Radio Row, of course, and we always appreciate him giving us time, but especially him being busy out on the road right now. Jason, I've never attended Radio Row. Some people say it's the coolest thing ever. Other people say it's overrated. Where are you? Obviously, you're excited to be there. I'm jealous that you're there, of course. But what is your takeaway for those who have never been to Radio Row? What is that experience like?
It's like summer camp with a bunch of people that have all met before and hang out. Like, so here's the thing. I think if you work in this business, it's a really cool thing to be around and be a part of. For consumers, for fans, I got to be honest, like, it's sort of an antiquated process in some ways. Like, think about the fact that 20 years ago, if Deion Sanders came on your radio station and you heard it from Media Row, you'd sit there and say, "Oh my God, we got to hear from Deion." Well, now in social media world, the minute Deion goes on with anybody, he's really gone on with all of us. So the fact that you see the same person going from booth to booth to booth to booth doing the same interviews, like it's redundant. But the other part of this is it's just part of the fun. It's part of the joy getting to see everybody out here and everybody being a part of it.
Jason, it's the big game. It's now. I don't know what the rules are on Radio Row. Does the NFL have lawyers if you say the word Super Bowl, or is it the big game? What are we calling it when you're on air right now?
Yeah, I'm probably supposed to say big game, and I still say the other two nasty words. But yeah, like it's one of the stupidest trademark things I've ever heard in my life. Like the fact that somebody comes and says, "You can't say those two words." I'm like, "Oh, what are we doing?" That's just it's the worst. I feel like I'm talking about the Kmart special version of the game every time I say it's the big game.
The last time they played this game, the Eagles and the Chiefs, I felt like the Eagles, and I don't feel like it. I just looked it up. 7 carries for both Sanders and Gainwell, 37 yards combined between the two of them. I feel like the Eagles are a little bit different roster this year. Still solid offensive line, solid defense. But right now, you're adding Saquon Barkley. How much of this game is going to be relying upon Saquon Barkley for the Eagles?
All of it. And the funny thing is the two metrics I think you got to look at for Saquon, not just his yards, which are through the roof, hammer the over, but then the other part of it is the yards before contact. And so some of that is his greatness with the jump cuts and all these things that we see him do that's beautiful to watch. But the other part of it is just the Eagles' offensive line is dominant. So it's really the interior of the line play is, I think, the most interesting matchup here, because the interior of the Eagles' defensive line should be able to get after the interior of the Chiefs' offensive line. And vice versa. Conversely, Chris Jones is going to have the game of his life against Saquon. It's just everybody says, well, Spags isn't going to let Saquon run. Okay, that's like me saying I'm not going to let LeBron dunk on me. Like, it's a great plan, but you get in the game, it changes. Saquon's special. It's the biggest difference. And I will remind everybody, different offensive coordinator, different defensive coordinator for the Eagles since that last Super Bowl. So it's just a very different football game.
Over 2,000 yards in the regular season for Saquon made such a big difference for the Eagles all year. With that kind of production, and if he's able to have a big game and force the Eagles over the top in the Super Bowl, how could that change the running back market as we move forward in the offseason? We've seen those guys get underpaid a lot in the past because you didn't think it was necessary. But with a guy like Saquon leading the Eagles here, if he can have a big game on Sunday, how could that change that moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the concept of tread on the tires just needs to be retired for a minute from the great ones. Like, this happens to be a weird year. Like, I believe that Saquon is a generational talent, that Derrick Henry's a generational talent, that Josh Jacobs is a generational talent. So each of the three of them being discarded by their teams, none of the teams that let them go are better off because they don't have them. And also weird for the running back market is this year, one of the few position groups in the NFL draft that actually looks stacked is the running back. So, like, it is it feels like the resurgence, but I think instead of everybody saying this is the resurgence of the running back, I think what we have to just acknowledge here is that exceptional is going to be treated exceptionally. And this year, particularly, exceptional wins. If I had an MVP vote, it would have gone to Saquon. If the Eagles win this Super Bowl, it'll be because Saquon's the MVP. I don't think there's a more important player in this game than Saquon, and that includes Mahomes. Mahomes can have a terrible game and the Chiefs can still win. Saquon cannot have a terrible game and the Eagles still win this to me.
We've talked about the three-peat extensively and how much that means for Mahomes. Outside of Patrick Mahomes, what would a Super Bowl win do most for whose legacy? Who has the most to gain from winning this one?
And so it's interesting because you win one, does it really my God, we sit here with McCarthy and say, but he only won one Super Bowl, right? Like, we sit there all the time and apply that. So I do think that winning one takes some of the pressure off of Hurts. But you want to talk about, we're talking about legacy cemented. Like, if the Chiefs win a third straight, then we need to really have a conversation about whether Bill Belichick is still the greatest coach of all time in the NFL. Because I'd argue right now, it sure as heck looks like it's going to be Andy Reid. And Charles Robinson said on Yahoo Sports last month when Bill Belichick took the North Carolina job, everybody kept talking about Bill wanting the all-time win record. Even Bill Belichick's camp looked around and said, what's the point of getting the all-time win record when we're going to be surpassed by Andy in a couple of seasons. Like everyone internally, even in Bills camp, believes that Andy Reid's going to end up the winningest coach in NFL history. So 3 straight for Andy Reid for Mahomes. I mean, I think that makes you the best ever. I'm not sure how you can even start to question that. And by the way, I also think that it's pretty feasible the Chiefs could win again next year, the year after. So I think for the legacy and for the historic conversation, winning 1 is great, but winning 3 straight is something you never forget. Like we remember those 49ers, Joe Montana, Jerry Rice teams because of their complete and utter dominance. The Chiefs enter that category of all-timer with this win. So I think there's actually weirdly more legacy to be gained for them.
With that being said, though, Jalen Hurts, obviously, if he gets this win coming up on Sunday. And a lot of people, obviously if the Chiefs or if the Eagles pull this win off, it's obviously going to be a lot of Saquon Barkley. But the last time these two teams went head to head in the Super Bowl, we saw Jalen Hurts not just play well, but outplay Patrick Mahomes. I mean, if he literally outplayed Patrick Mahomes in the last Super Bowl that they played, what would a win in this Super Bowl do for a guy like Jalen Hurts? To piggyback off that last question, just because we were talking yesterday, really trying to figure out where does Jalen Hurts stack up amongst the top quarterbacks in the NFL right now?
Yeah, I think it silences the concept that Jalen Hurts can't win. Like this is the nuances. Everybody wants to figure out if Jalen Hurts is, is he a top 5 quarterback in the NFL? Like I don't give a damn about any of that. What I say is like, can you win a Super Bowl with that guy? And that's ultimately the only question. Like we talked before about the fact that I'd rather put guys on tiers like at a bar. So are you top shelf? Are you well? Are you mid? Like what type of vodka are you? And so to me, the question that gets answered here is, can you win a Super Bowl with Jalen Hurts? Which, by the way, the answer is clearly yes. I mean, they were in that game. They could have won that game before with Jalen Hurts. So, you look at all of this and say, can you win it? Yes. This definitively answers that. This takes the conversation and quiets it around Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni. I mean, Nick Sirianni, not that different than Ryan Day. A few months ago, it was like, oh, this guy's getting fired. And now it's like, oh, this guy might actually win it all. And then we might actually have to put some respect on his name. Like that happens from a win here.
Speaking of Ryan Day, thanks to your team, he's now looking for an offensive coordinator. The Raiders go and get Chip Kelly. I tell you what, I really like the Raiders coaching staff. I think it's probably one of the more impressive coaching staffs in all of football. Obviously, no matter how good the coaching is, you need the quarterback, the straw to stir the drink. But just in what you've seen Pete Carroll do already as far as putting this coaching staff together, how impressed are you with the aggressiveness of what they've done, especially, getting Graham, obviously keeping him there, and then going to get a Chip Kelly out of Ohio State who just won a national championship?
The smart part about keeping Graham was that really what you're doing there is you're keeping Max. I mean, Max Crosby at any point could ask for a trade just like Myles Garrett has, right? Like at any point that could happen. And I would make the argument that Max has every bit the same right to win that Myles Garrett does. But you keep Graham somebody that he's comfortable with. You keep a defense that, even with the injuries, has played above its head repeatedly. And then you put a bunch of adults on the offensive side of the ball that, frankly, I trust immensely with quarterback development. Like whoever the quarterback is for the Raiders next year is going to be better because they have Chip Kelly and Pete Carroll than they would have been under the previous regime. I just think that's a pretty easy statement to make. And the most impressive part about this for Chip Kelly, and maybe the bit of peace to Ohio State fans that don't love that he left, is $6 million. Like the Raiders went out and reportedly gave an offensive coordinator $6 million a year to come work there. What does that say? That says that the Raiders are willing to spend whatever it takes to become a competent organization. There's no salary cap on coaches. So in the NFL, I've never understood this. Like if you really love Ben Johnson, if he was your guy, then go offer him $25 million a year. Like he's not going to say no to that. Like there's some element to me where I don't care about my billionaire's money. I just don't. So if Mark Davis is spending $6 million just to get Chip Kelly, what he's really sending is a message to the entire NFL. Like, hey, no, we're going to do the right thing. We're going to spend whatever it takes to put adults in the room to build this team. I think that's an important part of what's happening here. That's part of how you get seen differently. And if you're a team like the Raiders or a team like the Browns, you're a bad franchise, you have to figure out a way to just change the sea of suck that you live in. I think it takes money. I think it takes adults. I think it takes ripping it down to the studs. I think it takes patience. All of these things the Raiders, I think, are showing right now. So I'm actually more encouraged by this chapter of the Raiders and their hires than I have been in legit 20 years.
So obviously the Raiders showing their commitment, going to get a Chip Kelly and being willing to spend. And you brought up how, that just shows that organization is willing now to spend, to commit to that. But if you were Chip Kelly, who the last time he left the NFL, many people said that was a failed experiment. His reputation in the NFL took a major hit. obviously leaves the UCLA job to take the OC job at Ohio State, and then now welcome back in NFL circles. You'd have to think he was going to be very cautious and very picky about the job that he takes. And without there being a quarterback with your Raiders right now, we said yesterday that we feel like because the Raiders spent $6 million on him and because he picked the Raiders to go be their OC, does that signify that possibly them being aggressive to trade up to get a quarterback in this draft?
So it tells me they have a plan. I don't think he takes that job without a plan. So that plan's one of two things. Well, number one, they're going to trade up, which I think is probably a pretty reasonable assumption. Number two would be they are wildly comfortable. Like, one thing we have to go back to, there were people around Denver that were telling us 3 months before the draft that Sean Payton had his guy and wanted his guy. And we all thought it was going to be Bo Nix. Did we think it was going to work out this well? No. But to me, this becomes either a conversation about trading up or a conversation about being wildly comfortable with somebody else in this draft, whether that's Jackson Dart or Jalen Milroe or even Will Howard. I don't know. But to me, there's no way that Chip Kelly doesn't take this job, or takes the job, I should say, unless there was a clear discussion of what is our plan at quarterback, who are we comfortable with. They must have something that they're going after. I think the easy answer is a trade up, and a trade up would make a ton of sense. But, I would also caution, I believe that there are two transcendent players in this draft, Abdul Carter and Henry. Those are the two guys, right? Like, so we all know that. Those are the two guys that I think are absolutely there. There's a couple of offensive linemen that are very good too. But I would caution anybody, including, for example, the Browns, if they're considering moving down. Well, man, you might need Abdul Carter now more than you thought. Can you move down to 6 and still get him? I don't think so. So, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, because if the Giants are sitting there and quarterback's taken, then I think Abdul Carter is likely to go 3 or 4 in this thing. And so you can't move further down than that and still get a dude. And all of these teams that stink better worry about getting a dude. So I think it's a little curious, but yes, they must have a plan.
Jason Fitz, Yahoo Sports, hanging out with us from Radio Row here off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Jason, you talked about the Raiders. You talked about them having a plan. Speaking of teams with great plans, the Cleveland Browns, obviously, whatever great plan that they had, it wasn't enough to convince Myles Garrett that, hey, stay here. We have a plan. Trust us. It's going to work this time. Obviously, stuff happening behind the scenes that have led to this split. The trade request heard around the world yesterday that had everybody talking. Myles Garrett wants out of Cleveland. Many people are saying, what took so long? Other people are saying, man, this is really, really bad for the Browns. We said it could be obviously really bad, the situation that they're in, but it might be a way to kind of fix some of the issues that they have moving forward, because he's going to get such a big return. What was your thoughts of the Myles Garrett trade request yesterday? And then what do you make of the fact that Cleveland's coming out and saying we have no intentions of trading him, almost doubling down on the comments that Andrew Berry made last week?
Well, I think they have to keep any sort of trade value, but also, like, whatever happens here, it's all the fault of the Deshaun Watson transaction, like, in general, because look, they're not winning enough games because they don't have a quarterback, because the Deshaun Watson transaction. If they trade him, the complications of the salary cap are absolutely epic, which is difficult to take on because of the Deshaun Watson situation. So, like, either way, it's that. But here's the thing. I lived through Khalil Mack being traded, and I listened to everybody at the time absolutely roast the Raiders and say, hey, you don't trade a Hall of Fame caliber player. And I believe that, like, having lived through the trade, I believe you do not trade a Hall of Fame player, because realistically, bad teams are bad more often than not because they don't draft particularly well. So what are you going to get in return? It's real. Like, I hear everybody say you're going to get a haul of picks. Okay. Even if you're getting multiple first rounders and a couple of players out of it, are you getting a Khalil Mack, or are you getting a Myles Garrett out of that? Not likely. Right. Like, so the chances that you're actually going to get return on this are minimalistic. The same arguments that I'm making about why Max Crosby, even if he came in tomorrow to the Raiders and said, I want to trade, if I'm the Raiders, I say no, because I can't get enough to get anything back. The draft picks are the farthest thing from a guarantee. All draft picks are cheap labor. And right now, what message am I sending to my entire fan base if I let the one Hall of Famer that I have walk out the door? I hear you on it's going to be a rebuild, but, like, when Khalil Mack was gone, and the number of times that we've all sat here when the Raiders traded John Gruden and they got multiple first-round draft picks for it, everybody said, look at how brilliant that is. They're going to be able to restock the kitty. Okay. Are we forgetting how often teams draft poorly? How many bad first-round picks are selected? So, yeah, like, the chances that you're going to nail these draft picks are low anyway. And so trading, I wouldn't do it. There is nothing that somebody would offer me today that I would turn around and trade for Myles Garrett unless it was a quarterback on a rookie deal. Like, you want to offer me Jaden Daniels? Let's have a conversation. And there ain't no way in hell anybody's doing that. So I think, unfortunately, Myles Garrett wants to trade and people in hell want ice water. Like, it's not going to happen.
So you're saying Cleveland, not that you think that they shouldn't, but you feel like they won't actually pull the trigger on this, that he will be a Brown.
I think Myles Garrett will be a Cleveland Brown next season. I don't think there's any way possible that Myles Garrett is not a Cleveland Brown.
Love it. Clip it. That's a good soundbite. I appreciate that. So there you go.
You're
hey,
welcome.
Jason, you the man. We appreciate you as always. Send us out with this, your Super Bowl prediction. Are the Chiefs winning 3 straight? Jalen Hurts getting his first Super Bowl? What's going to happen this coming up Sunday?
I mean, the only way you beat the Chiefs is if you blow them out. As I keep saying, Mahomes has had the ball in his hand 7 times in the playoffs and Super Bowl, needing a score to win. He is 7 for 7 in the last 4 minutes of a game. So the only way you beat him is if you're up by 2 scores. So even though I think Philly's better in every possible way, and I think Saquon should be able to run the football, I can't find a way that the Chiefs get blown out coming off a bye week for Andy Reid, which means close game. Close game means Mahomes wins. Chiefs win 3 straight.
Jason, you the man. Appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of the week on Radio Row, and, of course, enjoy the Super Bowl. Thank you for your time.
Appreciate you, boys. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, good stuff. Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Elliot Rearing, Jacob Tissett with you here. Casey McAllister in the producer chair. We'll stay in the NFL. Roger Goodell asked about, well, what everyone keeps talking about with the Chiefs. You know, the officiating. His take might irk a couple people. We'll get to that when we come back. We're Off the Bench next. Appreciate Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports giving it some time from Radio Row. Yeah, I hear that all the time. I asked him to open up the conversation regarding a lot of media folks say, hey, Radio Row is a little overrated, but it's kind of a cool experience. If you haven't done it, I've yet to do it. I do want to do that at least once in my career. But people bring up great points all the time from a fan's perspective. What do we truly gain from any of our local stations going to Radio Row and taking part there? I think it's more of just an ego scratcher and just an experience for media more than it is for the fans. I don't know. What do you guys think? What do fans gain from these media outlets sending their talent to the Radio Row?
But I think that's okay.
Well, it's also access to interviews too. It's it's way more access to talk to people who you'd never talk to. So
yeah, like so when we get ESPN sends us like a They sorry, Jake, my bad.
No, you're good.
They always send us a list saying, hey, if you're going to Radio Row, and they'll, it's Jerome Bettis, like they'll send you like a long list of all these guests that you could pick from, and then of course when you have them on, they're not just on there because, man, I heard about this Justin Kinner guy in Dayton, Ohio. I can't wait to do his show. It's because we have some kind of shaving cream that we're trying to sell because they paid us a lot of money just to, hey, we're going to talk about the Super Bowl. But before we go, let me tell you about this shaving cream. Let me tell you about this pencil I have in my hand and tell you why you should buy it. So it's kind of a win-win for everybody, but it is a cool experience. But that's a good point. You're right. I guess the guests and the interviews that you get on the local shows that do take part in Radio Row kind of gives that back to the fans from that perspective. So, yeah.
Yeah, it would be awesome. We kind of got Radio Row for the memorial. That counts.
We got Urban. Well, Tom got Urban.
We did.
Tom got Urban.
Tom got Urban. Tom got Urban.
But we got a picture with Urban. So
that's all that matters.
Oh, that was very funny. That was very funny.
Yeah. But Jake, what were you going to say before I rudely
No,
interrupted you?
basically the same thing. It's, different interviews, different list, different people you can see. It's just, stuff you wouldn't even know you're going to get, and then you get out there, and I'm sure, stuff just falls into your lap. So it's a cool experience. And I don't think it's the worst thing if it is just a little, fun trip for radio.
Yeah.
You're doing the same show anyway. You get to go out to New Orleans or LA or wherever the Super Bowl is and have a good time. I think that's cool.
Roger Goodell yesterday, he got up on the podium and he was, he addressed the media and they asked a bunch of questions. It's where he kind of let it be known about the, the Flag Football League that they're potentially kicking the tires on, for in the future. But of course, he was asked about the one thing that we've been spending the most time on throughout this playoff, of course, is, well, not just the Chiefs' success, but what's the secret sauce to the Chiefs' success? Is it the quarterback? Is it the head coach? Or is it the guys in stripes? Take a listen to what Roger Goodell had to say when he was kind of boxed into a corner a little bit.
Well, this sort of reminds me a little bit of the script, right? That I write a script, and I have the script for the entire season. Listen, I think from a lot of those theories are things that happen in social media, and they get a new life. As you say, it's not your theory, but it's out there. Nobody wants it to be their theory. And so I understand that. I think it reflects a lot of the fans' passion. And I think it also is a reminder for us of how important officiating is. And I think the men and women that officiate in the NFL are outstanding. They have the highest possible standards. It's a ridiculous theory for anyone who might take it seriously. But at the end of the day, it's something we always have to continue to work on. How do we make our officiating better?
I don't know if that, when he says we have to do everything we can to make our officiating better, I think he's answering a separate question. Yes, you need to make your officiating better, but I think mocking the fan, I don't truly buy into that, but there's plenty to show that, okay, something weird always seems to happen. There always seems to be some play that does magically benefit the Chiefs to where they advance the ball or they extend a drive or they just magically get a pass interference call that magically puts them in field goal range to win the game down the stretch. I get that, but Roger Goodell kind of mocking the fans a little bit, I have the script that you guys talk about. It's crazy for you to think that this can happen. I think he could have handled that a little bit differently, but when you hear Roger Goodell, that be his response. What is your response? What's your reaction to that?
I think that's pretty exact to my response. People think the NFL is rigged. I think you should mock every single one of them. We should have more pieces like, what's his face put out, the Florio put out last week, making fun of Dean Blandino's brother. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. Anyone doing more than a bit about the NFL being rigged. Sure, it's fun to talk about. It's interesting with the Chiefs. The answer that he gave is the answer to it. If you get better refs that don't mess up calls, then you don't have this conversation. Though the refs are, very willy-nilly, a lot of human error, and I think that leads to a lot of these conversations. But no, the NFL is not rigged. We've known that forever. It's way too many people that would have to be in on some big elaborate scheme. Do things seem to go the Chiefs' way? Yeah, they do. Do the Chiefs have the best quarterback in the league and the best coach in the league? Yeah, they do. So maybe they get in opportunities where they just capitalize on those little mistakes more than other teams. So yeah, it's absolutely not rigged. I think that's a perfect example, and I think people are just trying to grasp at straws now that the team they hate's going for 3 in a row.
And again, when I blame the referees in the NFL, especially in regards to the Chiefs, you do have to walk a line and say that despite everything, the Chiefs making 5 of 6 Super Bowls, that's not just officiating. That's not it's just not. The Chiefs are a dynasty. They're very, very good. Patrick Mahomes is very good. Andy Reid's very good. They're a very good football team. They don't lose games. So that's one half of it. The other half of it that I do think the league dismisses is it does appear that the Chiefs do get the benefit of the doubt in those big moments. And there is some sort of gift, seemingly, to Patrick Mahomes once a game where he gets a call that no other quarterback in the league would get. If there was a face mask on Patrick Mahomes, nobody's missing that. Nobody's missing a missed face mask. And a part of what Roger was saying is they need to get better officiate. Well, yeah, it starts with getting guys in there that work full time and having referees where that's their full job and their full occupation, where they're 100% in on refereeing and making their craft better, because that's, in my opinion, one of the biggest flaws of the league. We have grade school teachers and mailmen officiating the biggest sport in the country, and that's no knock on that, but it's like no knock on those professions. Obviously, it's a knock the fact that these guys have to go out and get second jobs after officiating, the Chiefs-Eagles Super Bowl. It doesn't make much sense to me. So that's a part of it, and I don't know if it'll ever be fixed. It probably will not be, given the fact that it'll cost millions and millions of dollars. But I mean, as we go forward and the Chiefs get back to another Super Bowl next year, it's going to be the story. And for as many Super Bowls in a row as they get to, the refereeing will always be a story. I saw Travis Kelce, and I think he was asked, if you could ask the media one question, what would you ask? And he's like, why are you guys running away with this this referee thing? Why do you guys keep buying into this? Well, it's because that the Chiefs do get those big calls, and I think it's noticeable to just about everybody who watches this sport. So we'll see what happens going forward. I expect a big call to go to the Chiefs' way in the Super Bowl, and that's just the expectation that we've all come to know in the NFL.
Yeah, like I've always said, too, when people talk about the officiating and how it needs to get better, or I always say this. I think people say that every year. I don't think that there was ever a golden age of officiating. Man, we talk about that in the NBA. Man, the 90s was such a better era of basketball, man. How about the 2000s with all those dynasties, man? Like, that was just a better, tougher era. Like, we talk about that all the time in sports. We talk about, well, back in the day, this was better. Back in the day, that was better. Man, running backs were better back in the day. This, that, and the other. We have never, ever in the history of sports said, man, I wish we can go back to the 90s where officiating was at its peak. That's never existed. It never will. I truly believe no matter what changes, football, basketball, baseball, tennis, or any sport out there makes, we will always have a time throughout a season where we will constantly complain about officiating as far as that goes. Now, I think it helps, they came out yesterday or earlier over the weekend and said that they're going to electronically have an electronic marker to be able to spot the ball in some of those close situations like we saw with the Bills and the Chiefs in the championship round. But think about this, before there was instant replay, and we talked, man, instant replay is going to save sports, man. Like, they're going to get it right. How many times do we watch an instant replay and say, how the hell did they see that? How are they getting that from what we just saw? I just think even when you add, opportunities for the officials to increase the probability of them getting the call right, we still complain and say, oh, yeah, well, they could see it, but it doesn't mean that they're going to call it the way it's supposed to because they're in on the outcome of the game. I just think that no matter what happens, we will never be happy in the world of sports when it comes to officiating. Every year I hear it. Man, it's never been worse. It's never been worse. It's never been worse. I just don't know when it's ever been better. So is from that perspective.
I think there's going to come a point, and I was having this debate yesterday, actually. I think there's going to come a point where officials, referees, umpires, they are just delegating the information that is given to them. And the information that is given to them is based on high-definition cameras, and it'll be evidence that, the call was the correct call, and they're just there to say the information to everybody else. That's what the job will be in a couple of years. Because you said, tennis has eliminated officials altogether, essentially. I mean, they have the main chair umpire to settle gripes and things like that. But it's, all the calls on the court are via, video assist. So that's what sports should be. People are going to argue against balls and strikes, automated balls and strikes coming to Major League Baseball. That's something that is going to make the game better. I think if you look at Elly De La Cruz last year, I want to say there was 25 strikeouts on him that just weren't strikeouts based on what we're seeing on TV with the square, with the strike zone square. So I think it's gonna make sports better. I think that's where we're going. You can't eliminate officials in the NFL. It's a little bit more difficult given the fact that so many of those rules have like the asterisks based on official discretion. Yeah. Like holding, right? If you wanted to do automated refereeing, there'd be a hold on every single play. Mm-hmm. You can't do that because it's based on the referee's discretion on the field. Pass interference, same type of deal. There are rules that need to be fixed, that like face mask. There should never be a missed face mask in the NFL ever, period. Correct. You can see it on the replay. You can see it immediately. Most of the time, you should be able to see the guy's head tilt a different direction. Like there are plays in the NFL that need to just be fixed immediately because there's no excuse for them not to have the right call. I think the first down marker, that's a play that, again, you should have that information. We had two guys in two different spots running in the middle to try to argue which guy was right on that spot in that Bills-Chiefs game. That's not what this is. We have the technology to where if we chip up a football, the football will tell us where that very tip is, And if it's past the first down marker, it's past the first down marker. You should have that information readily available. I don't think officials will be ever completely eliminated. Somebody has to be out there and talking to the teams. But again, I do think there's a way to nearly perfect these sports the way they're called.
The only reason I'm against fully automated officials because it would make the game better. It would eliminate all the nonsense talking points that people have about, great teams in every sport being aided by officials. But then I would lose that too. Like, I like when the Reds lose or the Bengals lose, I can point to the officials and say, oh, they cost us the game. It's not our fault. It's not the Bengals. I like to have that in my back pocket. That's part of sports, to have that excuse built in. But, it certainly adds to a level of conversation that is definitely unnecessary in sports. But Elliot's absolutely right. If you have the capabilities to have, the high-def cameras and 250 million angles and everything else and an earpiece for, 4 refs or 5 refs or whatever on the field that can communicate it, that's the way to go, because you can iron everything out and make sure you don't miss stuff. And shouldn't that be the ultimate goal? Shouldn't the ultimate goal be getting everything right, not keeping, some level of humanity in the game or whatever the argument is for that? But, yeah, I think there certainly makes sense.
Elliot's NFL the future, an electrical grid will be put down on the field. But no, in theory, there should be something similar to where that ball, we don't need to look and zoom in and try to, see through the creases of an elbow to see where the ball is, to see if it touched the line or not. It should just be based on that, the technology of, okay, yes, it did. It touched this line. I mean, anyone out there that, has the electric collar on the dog or whatever, if it passes that, it zaps them to keep them in the yard. Same thing. Train the football, train the officials, train the league. It shouldn't be this difficult from that. Baseball, I'm the least forgiving for, especially when it comes to ball strikes, because the electronic version of that is the most simple. It's literally telling you it's in the strike zone, it's out of the strike zone. That's the simplest fix for baseball right there, that they're slowly leaning towards. Obviously, we're getting there. Football, I think, is difficult. Basketball is difficult. The one thing, too, about officiating, and the only reason we're jumping on this is because Roger Goodell, basically, if you're just tuning in, mocked anyone out there that just, it's crazy to think that there's anything like that. So the best thing to do is to mock people, to cool the temperature of the room, right? So now he has people even more fired up. But the thing that drives me nuts, too, is we say, hey, a foul is a foul, a face mask is a face mask, a hold is a hold. But this officiating group's version of a hold is different than this officiating group's of a hold. Like, you would think that there's these NFL-trained officials are all being told, hey, this is a hold. I don't care what you think is a hold. We're telling you as the NFL, this is a hold. I get tired of in the NBA, too. I hate this in basketball in general, whether it's high school all the way to the NBA. Oh, man, a senior would get that call, but you're a freshman. Freshmen aren't going to get that call. You dribble into the paint and get fouled. Well, if you were a senior, you'd get that call. Or if a no-name NBA player dribbles into the paint and gets clotheslined, well, if you were LeBron, we'd call that. But, since you're a nobody, we're not going to call that. That's a weird way of thinking. It's foul is a foul no matter who you are. But because we move that bar so much, it always leaves us open to, oh, yeah, you're just picking and choosing when you want to call a foul, which has the outcome of a game. That's what drives me nuts with officials.
Yeah, I think that's why if you have the capabilities, you're losing out on, every year you're losing out on the arguments to not use them, because we've seen them be used at various points in different, aspects. And the fact that, we've seen multiple times this year a replay be shown on a broadcast that the officials apparently don't have access to, or finding stuff out that after a play that they didn't have a chance to see or anything like that. You got to streamline the process. You have to have all the pieces of information that you have available to the people making the call and determining the outcome of games. Otherwise, you're not getting it right, and that has to be the number one most important thing, is getting it right.
All right, this is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410, Wing AM in Dayton. For a while, we kept doing this whole thing. What are we missing when it comes to the Reds? Like, we're all being, not negative, but, not jumping on the bandwagon of saying this team's going to the playoffs, this team's going to win the division. And then I felt like there was a shift on the show, because you have Buster Olney and you have McDowd and you have all these national hosts who are coming out and saying, man, the Reds are outside of the Dodgers, they're the most improved team in baseball. They're the biggest sleeper in baseball. They're the most exciting team in baseball. So then we started buying in. Well, now they suck again. The Reds are horrible. The Reds are a last-place team. We'll discuss when we come back. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Last week, I was like, man, the Reds are going to win the division. They're going to make the playoffs. Tito's going to be manager of the year. Ellie's going to win MVP. And we're going to finally watch the Reds win a World Series. I bought in. I started to fall for it. But then this week, we're told that the Reds stink. We're told that the Reds, that they suck again. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
What do you call it, Elliot? PETA? You know,
I call it PETA. Yeah, it's PETA. It's PETA.
PETA, what is this thing? What is Casey? You seem to be pretty knowledgeable of it before the show. What is this analytical device that tells us that our team stinks? Well, what do we got going on here?
Well, I'll put up the graphic of their standings first. They have the Cubs at 91 wins, which is crazy to me.
Well, no. What is that though? What PETA? What is this?
Yeah, it uses player metrics.
It simulates the season. That's the records and playoff percentages that it came out with. Reds at the bottom, Pirates at 4th, Cardinals in 3rd, Brewers in 2nd, and then the Cubs with, what did Reed say, the 3rd best record in baseball?
Yep.
Holy cow. So they love the Cubs and hate the Reds over at Petcoa and whatever kind of computer they're using for these simulations. I think we're coming out with 74 wins.
Interesting. Well, I heard Kirby say when him and Craig kind of dove into this too, and he said, listen, for everyone out there that says, oh, this is, we dislike this because they're just hating on our team, as Jacob just said, it's just, it's no human that's coming out with this opinion. It's all numbers based that's kind of thrown into that and how it's formulated. But Casey, sending it back to you quick, my apologies, but yeah, you seem to be pretty familiar with this, right? More than us, or more than me at least.
Well, the only research I did into this, Kenner, was to find out who was the founder, the originator of it, Bill Petcoa. The dude averaged 249 at bat and had 22 home runs his entire career.
Very nice.
I don't know. I don't know if I want to take advice from that guy. So I'm not going to listen to these projections.
I like Casey. I like that, Casey.
Yeah.
Well, those numbers, I mean, he'd be hitting cleanup for the Reds the last couple of years. To be honest. But Elliot, I know we opened up with this briefly. You seem pretty pissed off. You weren't a big fan of this, but look, this is and you were right talking about the wide range of who the Reds are going to be, because if this is what the final standings look like, I'm not going to lie. I don't think anyone on this show or tuning in or listening is going to be surprised, right? Like, I don't think that it's going to be a shocker if that's the case. And then if the Reds do what some of the national hosts like Buster Olney and others do, if they are the most improved team in baseball and they do shock the world and win the Central and are one of the most competitive teams in baseball, we kind of wouldn't be surprised by that either, especially with Terry Francona leading the way. I don't think there's a team in baseball that has more of a range of where they could potentially finish than the Cincinnati Reds. I think that was a good point you made to open up the show. I don't think there's any team out there that could win the division and be one of the best teams in baseball, or viewed as one of the worst teams in baseball and finish in last. I think the Reds have the largest margin, or have the largest gap between what they could be. And I think that's why we're all so unsure about this team at this point.
It's a very similar thing we were talking about going into last year. You're relying on so many guys to, quite honestly, play better than we've ever seen them play. And you're projecting for pretty much everyone. And any other team that you look at, they have at least a couple more rock-solid guys than we have. It's projections basically up and down the lineup for the Reds. And if you're optimistic and you think that maybe that these guys are going to all, or most of them are going to hit those ceilings, or at least get close to it, then you have the Reds, like Buster Olney has the Reds, and a lot of other guys have the Reds as one of the best off seasons in baseball, and a really exciting young team that's going to push for the playoffs. And if you don't think those guys are going to live up to that potential, and you think CES is going to be more of what he was last year than what he was in the minors, if you think Gavin Lux can't find a spot in the lineup, if you think Matt McClain can't get healthy and play more than 100 games, then you have the Reds with 74 wins, like our friends over at Petcoa. So I think it all, makes sense. You can at least justify really any win total you spit out for the Reds. You could say, I think Ellie De La Cruz is a 10-WAR player, NL MVP, and Hunter Green's the Cy Young. Terry Francona's manager of the year, they're going to win the Central. And I'd say, I can at least see that happening. It makes sense to me. And you could say all these guys are going to regress. They're going to be battled with injuries, and it's not going to be enough, and they're going to win 74 games and lose 90. And I'd say, well, sadly, I could see that happening too. So I at least understand why people have these takes. I certainly hope that the people saying we have the best offseason in baseball are more right than the people over at Petcoa, but obviously we won't know until we get into the season.
The Brewers, based on these same exact rankings last year, were projected 79 wins. They would go on to win 93 last season. So that's a 14-game game swing from the projections to what the Brewers finished. And it just goes to show that there's no way of accurately measuring what a team is until you watch the games. It's why I don't like the AP poll on college football before the season, because nobody knows what those teams look like yet. It's silly to measure, Florida State in the top 10 when they don't win any games. It's nonsense. So we can argue this all day and night, but it's what the Reds will do from March until May, and then from June until August. It's you got to watch the games, and we'll have a grasp of what this team is a month into the season. We'll have a grasp of how good we are, and if it's not a month in, it'll be 3 months in. I'm not concerned about these projections at all. I think it's nonsense. And by the way, I don't completely disagree. If they wanted to rank who wins the division, yeah, I think the Cubs win the division. I think the Cubs have the best roster on paper by far. I don't think it's it's a 20 game swing from first to last in the NL Central, but I think it's probably a 5 game difference. I think it's going to be a tight race. I think the NL Central doesn't have a ton of talent in it. So yeah, I do think the Cubs have the best roster, and I think the other 4 teams are probably going to be right around that 80 win mark. It wouldn't shock me at all if all 4 of the NL Central bottom teams are hovering around 78 to 82 wins. It wouldn't shock me at all.
We'll come out with our projections, Elliot and I, mid-June.
Correct.
We'll tell you how many wins the Reds are going to have mid-June.
Our preseason rankings will happen in June.
Yeah.
Elliot, I'm not saying I disagree with you. I do want to ask Jacob his take on the Cubs real quick. How talented are the Cubs? I know they added a big free agent, obviously, this offseason, but how talented are the Cubs? Are they the most talented roster in this division?
I think so. I think pretty clearly. I agree with Elliot. I think they might have the best player, probably do have the best player in the division. Now, Ellie De La Cruz obviously could get there, but Kyle Tucker is an established all-star in this league, best outfielder in the division for sure. And I think their pitching staff is great. Reed's told us a billion times how stupid it is to take the Reds pitching staff over the Cubs, and I think that's starting to build a little bit of space up in my head. Shota Imanaga, Justin Steele, and Talion and Javier Assad and all those guys, they have a good starting rotation, and this roster is really good. So I think the Cubs are scary and certainly going to be a tough team to overcome in terms of winning the Central. We talked about it yesterday. I think the Reds' best, maybe only chance at making the playoffs is to win the division.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be tough, especially looking at the standings last year and what the wildcard teams did to get in the National League. The Reds would have a tough time getting there. You're going to have to try to win the Central to get into the playoffs, and I think the Cubs are definitely number 1 on that list in terms of teams that worry me the most.
The Pirates, too, getting a little bit more love than the Reds, I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that's ludicrous.
No.
That's absolutely ludicrous. They've got 2 really good pitchers. Outside of that, they've got absolutely nothing. Brian Reynolds is a solid player, and then maybe, I don't know, who else do you want to throw in there? I'm out.
In defense of Petcoa, said in the simulations the Pirates finished last or finished 4th and 5th more often than the Reds, but the mean was the Reds at 5th.
You would defend PETA.
Yeah, those are my guys.
Yeah. You work for them secretly. I feel like you're behind the scenes just punching numbers, and
it's gonna be. It's gonna be a fun graphic to display in September when the Reds have somewhere around 80 wins. So it's gonna be a fun one. We beat their projection by 6 games.
Now my favorite thing is, real quick. I'm sorry. My favorite thing is we're getting all upset. Oh man, they like the Pirates more than the Reds, but the projected finish is 75 and 87 compared to 74 wins for the Reds, right? They think they're 1 game better than us. That's BS. We're getting all furious, as if finishing in 4th with the Pirates in last would make us feel better. Maybe
I'm not as angry with the number the Reds have as the difference between the Cubs and the Reds. The Cubs are not 20 games better than the Reds. They're just not, and I don't understand where those numbers are coming from, unless Petcoa is factoring in the fact that the Reds never stay healthy. If that's the case, then maybe I'll agree, but I don't think that's the case. I think they're saying on our best day, if we played our best day 162 times.
No. Casey, put that back up. The Reds play 163 games.
That's right. In this
model, the Reds play an extra game.
That's right. And
they lost it.
When we lost our extra game. That's right.
Hold on.
That's a good point. Actually.
I was just looking at this, and the Pirates at 75 and 87. That's not a 1 game difference to 89 losses. Reds play 163 games.
Yeah, we'll see.
So did we make that graphic, or was that the one that was put out by Petcoa?
That I don't know.
No clue.
Now that I don't know.
That totally, if we did it and in a hurry putting it up, whatever, we're a small crew. But if Petcoa, who takes pride in their numbers, and they make a calculation error like that, I'm throwing all this crap out the window.
They round it up. They round. That's like for their stupid projections. That's how they round it. So.
So they had us with like 88.7 losses or something.
Sure. Yeah. It's probably what it was, and they were like, let's just round it up.
But like, I do want to find that out. I mean, for if we made that or if they did. The other thing too, I heard Kirby say this, that they're usually not very favorable towards young teams. And Kirby, when he brought that up, I'm like, well, that's this Reds team. There's a lot of uncertainty because of the youth of the Reds, and whether the Pirates are one game better or not, the Pirates are very similar. They're a very young roster that is led by, has one of the best faces of baseball there. Obviously, Paul Skeens. Obviously, the Reds have Ellie De La Cruz. Not getting a lot of love because of the youth of the rosters, and I think that's a point that Kirby made on Chatterbox Reds when him and Craig were kind of breaking this down. So that plays a role in this as well, and the Cubs have a lot of veteran players on that roster, which is probably why they're getting a little bit more of a bump in some of those projections as well. Off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, something we have not talked about at all, and I'm surprised we all haven't really brought this up. When we did the media day that day, there was a question that was asked to Terry Francona that I jotted down to put in my notes for later and completely forgot about it and just kind of scrolled past it. For a Cincinnati Reds team that has so many questions, we keep talking about the health of Matt McClain. We keep talking about the, hopefully, you look at this rotation for the Reds and you hope that the guys in that rotation could stay healthy and, we don't see what happened last year heading into the month of September where it forced the call up of Rhett Lauder. But like Nick Lodolo's health is going to be key. That bullpen's health is going to be key. The health of everybody is going to be and play a major factor in this. But one question that was asked to Terry Francona was, in Terry Francona's absence, who leads this Cincinnati Reds team? And the reason I bring this up is because with all the question marks we have about the youth of this roster and all the question marks we have about the health of this roster, we might be the only team in baseball that pulls for a team that we have to question the health of our own manager. Because that's one reason that led to the retirement of Terry Francona, and to his credit, I don't think he would come out of retirement if he didn't trust his body. But that will be in the back of the minds of a lot of people as well. Are those health complications a thing of the past? And you can't ever promise that. You don't know what's coming. But the one thing that they had asked him is, in your absence, who leads this ball club? Now he brought up, obviously Brad Mills and Benavidez. And I bring that up because if the Reds ever find themselves in a situation like the Guardians did, where they were having to rely on the season continuing without their manager, Terry Francona, a name in which, by the way, the reason that we all believe that the Reds are getting that push as being one of the most improved team in baseball is just because of the addition of him. If he's out of the picture for a long stretch of time, Brad Mills, Benavidez, those are the two names that he threw out there as having full trust and faith in to lead this team moving forward in the situation where he's absent. That's another thing to consider too for this Reds team. Not a lot of teams are worrying about the health of their manager, not being insensitive to it, but that is the reality and the question marks that a lot of people had about Francona when he was hired by the Cincinnati Reds.
Yeah, and I think with everyone kind of unanimously listing him as the best addition of the offseason, if you lose that, where does this offseason fall? So I think when we talk about, the health of Matt McClain, the health of CES, the health of all these guys that we brought in and all these prospects we have coming up, you got to talk about the health of Terry Francona as well, because that might be as many wins as an injury to any of those guys. Yeah. I mean, if he misses a significant amount of time, who knows how much of an impact he has. That's something we've also talked about a lot lately. If we thought David Bell had that big of a negative impact, how big of a positive impact can Terry Francona have? Well, it's none if he's not in the dugout. So hopefully, he's able to stay healthy, and I 100% agree with what you said there. I don't think he's coming out of retirement. I don't think he's taking another job unless he had the utmost confidence that he'd be able to do it to the best of his ability. Everything that he's said, every soundbite we've heard is that he's a competitor, that he wants to win, that he's coming to Cincinnati because he thinks they can do so, and I don't think he's doing that if he's 1 foot in, 1 foot out in terms of health. I think he's confident in himself, and that's why until they give me a reason not to be, I'm going to be confident in that too.
Yeah, I can't worry about the health of our manager. I think he's in a position ready to roll. We were just with him. What was that? I don't know, 2 weeks ago. He looked fine to me. A couple months before the season. So I'm very confident in Terry's ability to stay healthy this year, and I'm not even going to think about that for a second.
Matt McClain looked good taking batting practice the other day. You know, he looks good right now, but we're still going to be wondering about his. I'm not questioning your I want that optimism. Why don't you have that optimism for the players, though? If the players look good heading into the season, aren't you still concerned about
the players are playing baseball?
The players are doing things. No disrespect to Terry Francona.
Terry's not, when his health took
that's true. That's true.
Terry's not out there running into walls and sprinting down the first baseline. That's the difference.
He seems like a partier. He seems like a partier.
Maybe. I am worried about the health of our players because I think in 3 straight years they've seemingly set the franchise record for most players used in a season. So it's like I have to be worried about it. Last year it was the thing that killed the Reds. I mean, we didn't have a roster for, I would say, over half the season.
Yeah.
Didn't have a major league roster for half the season. That's what happens.
And then we fired David Melfman.
Yeah. Matt McClain's great. I mean, Matt McClain, I was just looking at him right now, looking at the numbers of what he did in 2023 before he went down with an injury. In 89 games, he hit 16 home runs and had 50 RBIs. 16 home runs and 50 RBIs in 89 games at an OBP of 357. The dude's, he's just unbelievable. If he's able to do that this year, then we're in a very, very, very good spot. I feel very, very confident if he's able to replicate 2023, the Cincinnati Reds will be competing for the division and for the playoffs.
I feel like we talk about managers the way we talk about running backs in football, like where we don't say running backs. Like running backs, we say, well, running backs, you could just get any running back, any running back that's going to produce. I'm not saying you just move on from Saquon when we look at the Giants, right? But like, there's this theory or this narrative out there that you don't pay running backs, you could get any running back, and we kind of say that about managers in baseball. Well, doesn't matter the manager, obviously, especially in today's baseball, we kind of talk about both of those very similarly. However, when we talk about them being there, it's we appreciate what they bring to the table, but if we lose them, it's not a big deal. If we lose our running back, it's fine. If we lose our manager, it's fine. It's funny how similar the talking points are for both. And I know we'll get into the running back conversation more throughout the week as we talk about Saquon and the Eagles leading into that. But nonetheless, this is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Elliot Ray, and Jacob Tissett with you here. Casey McAllister producing for us. As always, we appreciate him. We'll step away for a few moments, and we'll pick up with this when we come back. More Off the Bench next. All right, and we are back. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Yesterday, we talked about the biggest trade that got everyone's attention yesterday. Of course, Luka going to the Lakers, and then, of course, the trade request, Myles Garrett wanting out of Cleveland. So then we transitioned to that talking point, to that conversation. But we never got to dive into, what for the teams that we follow, what is that one trade that gave you that type of reaction that we saw everyone's reaction with Luka to the Lakers? And it doesn't matter. It's whatever team you follow. Obviously, the Bengals will be in this conversation, obviously the Reds, but any team out there that you guys follow, what was the biggest shock reaction you had to a move that your team made that you were just stunned by the fact that they actually pulled the trigger on that? Is there anything similar that you could think of that gave you that similar reaction that everyone seemed to have with Luka going to the Lakers over the weekend?
No, I will say there were some nuggets that came out yesterday I sent your way that made this trade 10 times crazier than it was even yesterday when we were talking through it. So it was reported by Kirk Goldsberry on Bill Simmons' podcast that the conversations between the Mavericks and the Lakers have been going on for about 3.5 weeks about trading Luka for Anthony Davis, or a trade centered around those two players. And the Mavericks, as we talked about yesterday, brought it to the Lakers. Well, it turns out the original iteration of this trade was both the Lakers' first-round picks and Dalton Connect. Since that trade was agreed on, Rob Pelinka, the Lakers GM, whittled that down to the trade that we saw go through over the weekend. The 1 first-round pick, Anthony Davis, Max Christie, holding on to Dalton Connect and a first-round pick. So he basically just told the Mavericks GM, you're right, Luka's fat, Luka's drunk, we'll take him for our center.
Yep.
So crazy that he was, the Mavericks GM was played like that, even more so than we thought beforehand.
Like a fiddle. I would say the most shocked I was, at least in my lifetime, and I haven't had a ton of them in my conscious being of myself. I mean, when I was a kid, there was a couple. We can talk about those too. But the biggest one I actively remember, and it was definitely by far the biggest move that the Reds have made in my lifetime, is when Yasiel Puig, Matt Kemp, Alex Wood, and Kyle Farmer came to town. We gave up Homer Bailey and Jeter Downs and Josiah Gray. So that was the massive, massive trade. I'll never forget where I was. I was at the movie theater in, what's the one over the river? What's the one? Newport. My God. Newport. The Newport movie theater. I was over there watching something, and I got a notification during the showing of a Bo Burnham movie. It was called 8th Grade. And I had to leave I left the movie theater. I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And it was a massive trade. Homer Bailey was terrible for the Reds immediately after signing that contract. And the fact that we got to get rid of him for Yasiel Puig, Matt Kemp, Alex Wood, and who we didn't know would be a solid Red for years to come, Kyle Farmer, was by far the most shocking. And it gave me the biggest reaction in my life.
Yeah, being Reds and Bengals fans, we kind of talked about this yesterday too before we got into this topic, but we don't have that many examples. I mean, most of the big-time trades that happen in our lives we're on the outside looking at. I mean, the Bengals and the Reds don't make moves in the season, so I don't really have a trade to pin down. But the most shocking move one of my teams has ever made, I guess it's kind of a trade. That's where college football is headed now. But Caleb Downs transferring to Ohio State. That was, when that alert came across my phone, it was one of the most shocked I've ever been. Obviously, contracts and it's more free agency than a trade. But certainly conversations happened that probably weren't allowed and everything along those lines. So it probably seems more like a trade when you really break it down. But to see a guy that was a freshman All-American, led the country in tackles at the safety position, one of the best safety of all time in a single season, and then to transfer to my school was pretty cool.
For me, I would have been 10, 11 years old, but I would have to say the biggest trade for a team I follow in my lifetime would have to be we're coming up on the 25-year anniversary of this, of when the Reds traded for Ken Griffey Jr.
Yeah.
Mainly because a lot of people remember just the old Ken Griffey Jr. in those final couple years with the Reds, but the Reds did get a couple very good quality years of Ken Griffey Jr. It wasn't like they got just the depleted version of him. They got a couple big pops from him for a few seasons before you started to see the decline into the mid-2000s, of course. But it was the fact that when you look at the details of that trade, the Reds were one of the teams that were in the mix to get him. But just like all Cincinnati sports, or, for most of the teams we follow, all right, well, if the player gets to waive his no trade to pick where he's going to go, he's not going to pick Cincinnati, even though there was the Cincinnati ties. So that's what everyone thought. Well, that gives the Reds a chance, of course. But at the end of the day, it was like the Mets, and there were some other teams in the mix. And at one point, they were close to getting a deal done with another team, and then it comes out that Ken Griffey actually got rid of everyone else on the list and just said, get me to Cincinnati. I think Mike Cameron and some other names were involved. But I think that's probably for Reds fans, at least, with all the experiences for older Reds fans who got to watch World Series, championships, and others. For those of us who don't get to experience the World Series, these are our World Series. These are our memories of when the Reds pulled off these moves that just got us all excited, right? Ken Griffey was obviously one of those moves. I think another one, and that's a good point. Look, Yasiel Puig, is he a generational talent? No, but he was one of the biggest names in baseball. And although he wasn't the centerpiece of that trade, it made that trade feel larger than life for Cincinnati at that time, who was just drowning. So I thought that was a big move. The Bauer move was big, of course. But I think the one most recently, it wasn't a trade, it was a move. It was the Reds getting Terry Francona. It's rare that any team that we follow goes out and gets the best option at something. And the Reds went out and they didn't just get a mid-level pitch. Hey, we need pitching. They went out and got a mid-level pitcher. Oh, we need an outfielder that can, has a little power. all right, let's go get Austin Hayes. Like, we're used to those moves. Those moves don't, get us super jacked and excited. But the fact that they got Terry Francona, I think, was a humongous, bringing all Reds fans together for a brief couple days span. The negativity kicked back in a couple weeks, months later. But for that 1, 2, 3 day stretch where we all celebrated that was a very cool move by the Cincinnati Reds. But from a trade perspective, like the Luka thing, I'd say for me, a team I follow, obviously, the Ken Griffey Jr. to the Reds was one of the biggest trades that I recall from any team that I follow.
A lot of people in the chat throwing out Matt Latos.
Yeah,
that's another big one in the city.
I was looking at a couple of them right here, and you mentioned the Griffey one. It was Mike Cameron, Antonio Perez, Brett Tomko, and Jake Meyer for Ken Griffey Jr. This is just unfortunate. I was reading some of this. From 2000 to 2007, Ken Griffey Jr. missed 453 games with the Reds. The Reds had one winning season during his stretch here. I was reading. I was like, that's crazy. Brandon Phillips. People forget Brandon Phillips was brought here by a trade. They gave up Jeff Stevens, a guy I've never heard of in my entire life, for probably my favorite baseball player to ever walk this planet, in Brandon Phillips. So that was a big one. I know Everett put this in the chat, but Bronson Arroyo, the Reds got Bronson Arroyo from the Red Sox. We gave up Willie Mo Pena. That was a massive one. Bronson Arroyo is a Reds Hall of Famer, so obviously incredible there. From the Mets, we got Tom Seaver for Pat Zachary, Doug Flynn, Steve Henderson, and Dan Norman. 1977, the Reds get Tom Seaver from the Mets. Just some of the bigger trades in Reds history. But yeah, and especially as of late, there haven't been a ton of massive trades. But there was still a couple. Scott Rowland, Shin-Soo Choo. There was a couple names that the Reds have gotten via trade where they've made good moves. Signing, different story though. They haven't signed a ton of great guys for their bat.
What about for you guys, the Cincinnati Bengals? Obviously, I mean, I think Orlando Brown Jr., that's a signing. That was a huge, massive signing. I thought that showed the willingness of the front office to, everyone says, oh, they're cheap. They're not doing their best to protect Joe Burrow. Well, I think going to get the best free agent option, offensive lineman that offseason showed that was not the case. That was a huge one. What about a trade? Is there a trade that comes to mind for Cincinnati that you guys were like, holy crap, I can't believe they pulled that off?
Not positively, if I'm being honest. Yeah. The one that jumps out to me negatively, Casey and I talked about it a couple weeks ago, but it was 2018 when we traded first-round pick for Cordy Glenn of the Bills, moved down a couple slots, and that certainly did not work out for the Bengals. Bengals made their third ever in-season trade with Khalil Herbert backup running back this year, so not a long list of guys that the Bengals have traded for. They did trade for Reggie Nelson in 2010, and he obviously came here and led the NFL in picks one year at safety, so that's a pretty big one. But outside of that, unless, Casey, I'm missing anything big, I can't think of a major trade in Bengals history that jumps out to me.
No, nothing that was shocking. Nothing like what was...
Or positive.
Or positive, really, yeah. I mean, they were really close on making it positive, but just got jumped ahead of them. The Lions jumped ahead and got Frank Ragnow, and we got Billy Price out of that, so... Yeah, nothing really that stands out to me for the Bengals. I guess trading Carson Palmer
BJ Hill. The chat's right. Flipping Billy Price for BJ Hill.
Yeah.
That was a great move.
The Carson Palmer trade. Those were all I guess shocking because it actually became real.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
And then, obviously the Browns, trading. What was it, like a couple thirds? Was it just some late round picks?
Something like that. The prime of Nick Chubb and Myles Garrett.
What about this one? The Bengals acquired safety Reggie Nelson.
I think I just said that.
Did you just say that?
Yeah.
That's my bad. I was looking at this list and I
it was like 2010.
Yeah, it was 2010. That's my bad.
He had a great couple seasons here before he went to Oakland.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll obviously for the Browns because I know people will get annoyed if I don't bring that up because that clearly was look. We were all wrong about that one, so that clearly did not work. But I'd be lying if I said, holy crap, the Browns just went and got a top 5 quarterback in the NFL because he was the last time he had played.
I was scared. Hand up, I was scared.
I was excited about that. I thought, here we go. Another Browns trade that was a big one, although I am not a fan of this guy now, of course, but OBJ, when the Browns would go 0-16 and then they won like 7 games the next year, and it looked like they had their quarterback in Baker, and they did. They just kind of let it go from that standpoint.
Browns almost gave us an answer, but it fell through at the last second when we almost traded AJ McCarron to Cleveland for a second-round pick.
Yep.
And then the Browns owner or GM, I forget how the story goes, but blocked the paperwork so it wouldn't get in time because we would have been really happy. But that would have been a doozy of a trade for Cleveland.
That's hilarious to talk about.
We are. I mean,
one less name on
recently. Yeah, McCarron on that jersey would have been nice, but it just happened recently, so we skipped over it. I think looking back into the past, but I mean, I was shocked when the Reds flipped Jonathan India for Brady Singer. The timing when it happened.
I mean, I wasn't shocked. I think we all expected him to be dealt at some point.
Not that early.
Not that early.
I was blown away when that alert came across my phone.
And it was for somebody relevant too, which I didn't think was.
And
possible.
after Martinez accepted the option, we heard that they were done with that trade, and then still went through. I was in the Skyline drive-thru. I texted Elliot right away.
That was at dinner. That's right. Jacob
broke the news.
Broke the news to me at dinner. It was crazy.
The other thing too, like it's sad, all these examples we're giving, literally none of them come close to the Luka deal to the Lakers, because it's one thing if the Mavericks had let it be known that, hey, Luka, the Mavericks are looking to trade Luka ahead of the trade deadline, which is coming up this Thursday, and then they get a deal done with the Lakers. It would still be, oh my God, Luka's going to the Lakers. But I think it's because this was just done out of nowhere. It was just like we woke up and we found out something happened that no one was anticipating. A lot of these moves, Griffey was being talked about of potentially going to the Reds for a little bit. We knew he was not going to be with Seattle, so him being traded, it wasn't a shocking move. It was, okay, breaking news, they finally got that trade done, talking about Seattle, of course. So you know, a lot of these moves too, we expected a move to be done, so it wasn't shocking. It was like, oh, cool, they got this player in return. That's great. Francona was pretty shocking, but again, we knew that the Reds had to hire a manager. We had no clue that the Lakers and Mavericks were looking to do this. I think that's the most shocking one I could think of, even for teams I don't follow. I can't think of anything close to what we just saw this past weekend with Luka to the Lakers.
And that's the craziest part of that whole trade. Obviously, we can go into them not shopping him around and the return and only talking to the Lakers, yada, yada, yada. That's, I think, a different conversation about their GM and how he handled that. But the fact that it didn't get out at all, a trade of this magnitude with players of this magnitude and this level of star power. Trades with the 8th guy on the bench in the NBA get tweeted 3 days before they happen. I have no idea how this didn't get leaked. Kudos to Pelinka and the Mavericks GM Nico for keeping it, tight to the vest. I think that's probably the only way it gets done if you're the Lakers, because if it gets out that Luka's on the market, someone's coming in with a massive, massive offer, might swipe him out from under your hands. So I think that was absolutely crucial in getting this done, and I just can't believe that it stayed this quiet, that there weren't any kind of rumblings that the trade was going to happen.
Imagine being the Jazz who just sit there and watch. And they not say a thing either.
Danny Ainge said he didn't know until 30 minutes before it went in.
Really?
They knew they were taking on Jalen Hood-Schifino's contract and getting a second-round pick to let a big trade go through. He said he assumed it was Zach LaVine or De'Aaron Fox, and then it came out that it was Luka when it was too late. They had already signed the papers.
That's wild. We do have breaking news. This is per Casey McAllister. He sent this via X.com via the Cincinnati Bengals. We being the Cincinnati Bengals, have signed wide receiver Mitchell Tinsley to a reserve/future contract.
This is right up there with Luka. Oh, man.
Yeah.
The signing heard around the world.
The Bengals have their guy. Bengals have their wide receiver.
Unreal. You got me for a second. I was like, oh, what happened? What did they do? But nonetheless, speaking of the Bengals, real quick, last thing on this Luka thing too. Like, it is weird because, like, it's one of the worst trades in NBA history, but Dallas is going to keep winning. They're going to keep winning. The Mavericks are a good team. Anthony Davis, people are acting as if they just sent some scrub to the Mavericks with the first-round pick. Like, you're getting arguably maybe the second-best big man in the NBA in exchange, and you're going to get him for, I mean, it's not as if it's the last year of it, not just his contract, but of his career. I mean, Anthony Davis, to have a centerpiece like that, not just a tall center that's a shot blocker, but a legitimate star center, Mavericks didn't get nothing in return. Let's just be clear, but it's the meat that was left on the bone. What they could have gotten in return for Luka is what people are talking about. But I will say, I think people are being a little disrespectful to Anthony Davis because I don't think what they got back was nothing. The fact that you have Kyrie and Klay Thompson and Anthony Davis, a centerpiece moving forward, obviously, and of course Dallas has never been afraid to spend money. They're going to be aggressive, and they technically have a first rounder to use now if they want to add somebody else to this group as well. So Mavericks are going to keep winning. I don't think they're not winning a championship. And what's crazy, this was the biggest move in NBA history, and I don't think it makes either a championship contender this year. So who knows when it's all said and done. But I think Dallas is still very good moving forward, and the Lakers are much better with Luka as just having a top 3 player in the NBA now. So we'll see what happens there. But, yeah, I just thought it was interesting how many people were bearing Anthony Davis as if the Dallas Mavericks got nothing in return. I disagree with that notion right there.
Yeah, that's the craziest part of this entire thing. Anthony Davis is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's one of the better players in the NBA, top 5 or 10 on any given night, and he played, I think it was 78 games last year, 76 games last year, something like that. So the injuries are whittling back quite a bit as well. I think that's a huge piece to this trade. It's something the Mavericks obviously valued greatly, was getting a defensive presence, a big man, and they got one in Anthony, one of the best in the entire league. And the conversation has always been that they could have traded Luka for how many first-round picks if he was on the open market. How many first-round picks is Anthony Davis on the open market? So when you do that, I mean, he's 3 or 4. He's absolutely one of the best players in the NBA. So when you do that math, maybe it's not as much of an underpay as a lot of people think. Still definitely is.
Not enough. He's not good enough to carry a franchise, though, Anthony Davis.
I absolutely think he is. He did it in New Orleans.
They didn't win a thing.
Well, you're not winning a championship with him.
That's the whole point.
But they obviously didn't think they could with Luka either. That's why they moved him.
Yeah, but he got to a championship. That's the craziest part of it all. Like, Anthony Davis has never done anything by himself. Like, a good player, Hall of Fame. That's what I'm saying. He's a very good basketball player, but it's absolutely crazy. You have the face of the league on your team, and he just got you to a finals, and you trade him away for Anthony Davis, who probably won't have Kyrie Irving for a long period of time. So then what are the Mavericks? I don't know. Probably not anything.
Centers are a little different, though, without the ball in their hand as much in a guard-dominated ball-handling league.
He's not a center, though. He doesn't want to be a center.
I think that he absolutely is a piece that you add, and you're instantly moving up the board as a championship contender.
I think the Mavericks are closer to competing right now than they were before, and I think the Lakers are worse in terms of a championship this season.
The Mavericks this year, I will never not argue it. The Mavericks this year, yes, they are better. If they don't win a championship this year, it's an utter failure and a colossal disaster that they've just done.
We'll see how they build around Kyrie and AD. Everyone said the Kyrie trade was a disaster. It got him to the finals. So we'll see what happens.
Also, this move wasn't made to win a championship this year either, but also Kyrie's still playing. I mean, he's a snub from the All-Star game.
Wait. What move wasn't to win a championship?
This move was to avoid paying him $315 million, which they don't think he's worth.
Oh, see, I think that's if that's the case, then I think that's even more ludicrous.
They said that.
Because even if you paid him, you just trade him, and he's still worth the same amount. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. If you're not doing this to win games, then you're really stupid.
I didn't say they didn't do it to win
games. They've said it was for the Supermax. They've said that multiple times.
If that's the case, then that's the dumbest thing ever, because you just trade him on the Supermax, and every team would be lining up for it.
So, and you're right, that is a thing, but also then his trade value goes down, because also at the same time you're taking a guy that is, by the way, the Lakers.
And he'd have a trade clause, so he'd get to pick where he goes.
No, like the Lake, he has way more value. This is why they messed up, because now that he's going to the Lakers don't have to pay him as much. Like, what the max money they could pay him is like $140 million less than what the Mavericks could have paid him. So that's what made this even a better deal for the Mavericks as far as that's concerned. That they left meat on the bone. They should have got more back in return, I guess, is the point in that regard.
Correct. If they would have got more back in return, this is not a non-story. It's a massive story, but it makes a little bit more sense to everybody, because if you put him on the open market, there would be 40 teams out of the 30 NBA teams that are lining up to try to get Luka Dončić, and will do whatever they could to get him.
Yeah, and I tell you what, though. That was the biggest, we're talking about that being one of the biggest trades in NBA history, but it wasn't the trade that just happened the other day as well that actually has elevated a team into NBA championship contention. Now, I think the Spurs are going to get De'Aaron Fox to pair with Wemby and Chris Paul. Like, I think that was honestly, to me, if you were going to make it about improving your team to win a championship this year, the Spurs made the biggest move of the weekend in that regards. And everyone's like, oh, well, that's cool. But Luka in LA, that's what has everybody talking. And that's the, it is what it is. But the NBA is interesting again. Good for
There's
the NBA.
nothing I want more than Wemby and some meaningful basketball. Get Wemby deep in the playoffs. Let me watch him play some meaningful series. He's absolutely incredible. And, pairing De'Aaron Fox with Stephon Castle and Chris Paul can kind of guide him along. And I think that team's going to be really, really fun to watch for a while.
I'm cheering for Luka and LeBron like they're the dream team. I'm legit. I'm going to war for that team. I hope they win a championship, and I hope they laugh all the way to the bank.
Would it be funnier if Luka's going to end up being the best player to ever play basketball now because of this, right?
Sure. Oh, 100%.
LeBron's going to get him locked in on his magic.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, Luka's going to be incredible. Would it be funnier if when Luka's averaging 30, 10, and 10, he's 400 pounds or he's absolutely shredded and jacked? And the Mavericks trading him, kicking into gear.
400 pounds.
Which one sticks it to the Mavericks more? I think if he was I was just fat because I was here and I didn't have to.
No, if he's doing it still while he's fat.
Okay.
It's still fantastic.
I think it'd be pretty funny if he just got absolutely jacked and just tore it up in the best shape of anyone in the league.
That would be very good too.
I will say this too. Everyone's talking about the impact that LeBron can have on Luka. I think it might be the opposite, only because
absolutely
LeBron's ego. Everyone's like, oh, this is the first time in LeBron's NBA career where he is, maybe you can count the Heat, but it's the first time where he's not the best player on the team. That might piss him off to the point that people are saying that he may go out there and say, oh, yeah? All right, well, I'll show you. I think the competitiveness between him and Luka actually could be a thing that elevates it because LeBron's looking around that Lakers roster and he knows he's the guy. I don't know if he's the guy anymore, and that's what everyone's talking about. But that might be what fuels him to say, okay, that is my motivation to go out there and be the guy moving forward. So I think they're both going to complement one another. But I do understand those who are worried about how they play together because they both need the ball. But LeBron's skill set, I've said this before, LeBron, any given year, if he wanted to be the best rebounder in the league, he would. If he wanted to be the best passer in the league, he would and could. And if he wants to be the best scorer in the league, as we've seen the last couple of years as he pursued the scoring title, obviously the best scorer in the league. He could be the best at whatever the hell he wants outside of shot blocking because I think Wembanyama has that pretty much, in the bag at this point. I could see LeBron just turning into a rebounding assist machine and still averaging about 20 a game. So I think we could see LeBron actually elevate his game in this regards because of Luka being there.
I'm holding out hope this extends the career. I mean, he said in interviews and in the locker room, really since their championship in 2020, that he wanted AD to take control of the team, to be the number one option on the team, to run everything through Anthony Davis and let him kind of take a step back as he hits 40 years old. He doesn't want to drive the bus every night, and I think that's a completely reasonable ask. And now with a guy like Luka who's never done anything but drive the bus, maybe we get 5 more years of LeBron instead of 2. And man, that would be I would owe Nico Harrison everything if he gives me 3 extra years of LeBron.
Oh yeah,
make these records absolutely untouchable. That'd be phenomenal. But yeah, I think this could absolutely extend LeBron's career, and everything that has been a negative about Luka so far in his career is stuff LeBron does really well off the court, body management, everything along those lines. So he'll help Luka as well off the court. I think this is, if we have to figure out how LeBron James and Luka Dončić work on a basketball court, you're thinking too hard. They're going to work. They're 2 of the best scorers, 2 of the best facilitators in the entire game. It's going to be just fine.
All right, we'll step away for a few moments. When we come back, the Kansas City Chiefs are preparing for a three-peat. They're preparing for Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. That should be their focus. So why are they talking? Why is Chris Jones? Why are these guys mentioning the Cincinnati Bengals? Why are the Bengals even on their mind right now? That's the question I have, Chiefs fans. We'll get to that when we come back. the Chiefs are preparing to three-peat. They should be talking about Jalen Hurts. They should be talking about the Eagles, and instead, the Bengals are on the mind of the Kansas City Chiefs, of course. Can you believe this? Last week, or I think over the weekend, Jamar Chase will not give them any credit whatsoever, right? The Chiefs won't give them any credit. Well, the Chiefs, they respond. Defensive tackle Chris Jones for the Chiefs, when asked about the toughest competition that they face in the AFC, can you believe he had the nerve to say the Bengals? He's complimentary of you guys. Your team's a bunch of bullies. They talk smack about the Chiefs, and here they are being the bigger person. All right, kudos to Chris Jones and the Kansas City Chiefs here.
Listen, the Bengals are the Chiefs' only competition. We've known that for years now, and we've known it after this season. I said it. If the Bengals were to make the playoffs, and that's why the Chiefs had one of the most disgusting displays of effort I've ever seen in a National Football League game in the last week of the season against the Broncos, because they knew if Carson Wentz lit it up in that game and they will beat the Broncos and the Cincinnati Bengals got in, if that happened, the Chiefs were done. The Chiefs were done, and the Bengals would have won. The Bengals would be playing for a Super Bowl against the Eagles, and that would have been the story. Unfortunately, it's not the case because they told Carson Wentz to play as bad as a person could play.
We all know the NFL's rigged.
It's rigged. It's rigged, and we know officials. We know officials are, and it comes full circle on this show because now I'm fully convinced that the Chiefs did what they did on that final week to eliminate the Bengals. That was their only goal.
Because they can't beat the Bengals, right?
That's right. They can't beat them. Don't look at the record, but they can't beat them.
They've won 3 straight against the Bengals.
Don't look at the record. I said don't look at that record.
We don't do numbers on here.
Do not look at the record. The Bengals are better than the Chiefs in every category.
We call it Burrowhead.
Correct.
They don't have a nickname for Paycor.
Zach Taylor, are you kidding me? He's way better than Andy Reid. Way better than Andy Reid.
I'm glad they appreciate us as much as we appreciate them.
Yeah, same. That's where I like to be. We got them right where we want them.
All right, so that wraps it up for us on the radio side. Appreciate you guys hanging out.
Oh wait, actually, real quick. Sorry, no, real quick.
Whoa, what we got?
I saw there was a big Browns protest yesterday. Real big. Casey, any chance we can get that picture up real quick before we leave this radio station on X.com in our DMs? I saw this protest, and I was just curious because they haven't had a protest outside their stadium in years. Myles Garrett asked for a trade, and it's time to get the people going. It was a massive crowd. A massive crowd was out there supporting Myles Garrett. And once Casey gets a picture up, you'll be able to see. But it's I think that this protest is the one that's going to work. Without question, this protest is the one that's going to work. So were you there? You didn't go, right?
Oh, no, I did not. I sent my hatred from afar.
That's fine.
The straw that broke the camel's back in the last, 35 years of Browns football was Myles Garrett requesting a trade. That's a shame. Kudos to those guys, though. I mean, we talked about it with Luka in Dallas, how important that is for fans to make their voice heard.
I did it. I did it when the Reds started trading away all my guys. I was out there with my sign, and I sat outside. It's very important.
It is. That's the only way you get people to understand where you're coming from and how you feel. Now we're just biding time for Casey to pull this up at some point.
I think it's over. I think it's okay, Casey. It's all right. It was.
I found the video.
No, it was okay. All right, that's okay. That's it. Now we're done. Now you can end the show.
No,
that was just
Casey, because you couldn't find the picture of the one that they're talking about.
It's in the chat.
It's in the chat, Casey.
But like the people that show up early to something and you get the crowd like that. But how about you show them the picture I just sent you, Casey? How about you show them about the amount of people that actually showed up to this? Yeah, because that's just like the record. We don't look at the record.
Don't show them that one, Casey. Show the one that I sent in the chat. It was 4 messages ago. 4 messages ago. That's it.
That's the picture we were looking for.
That's the one. That's how many people showed up.
Hundreds, if not thousands.
Millions,
those are actually the most angry. First of all, those are the 3 most angry fans because they got there an hour before. Show them the other one.
That's good stuff.
Don't show them that other one.
Show the other one. Show the other one.
Hey, Casey?
I'm pulling up the other one.
Okay. Okay. I was curious.
Or you just leave this one up.
We don't have to show that. We don't have to
I
show
did
that
so when I saw that, I thought that was embarrassing.
Go.
Oh, there we go.
There we go. Now,
party.
did you think if you guys would have done this a while ago, we might not have been here?
No, because this ain't gonna work either.
Okay. All right, that's fine then. As long as we're all on the same page.
By the way, is that from yesterday? Because it was warm yesterday.
Yeah,
That
this
might
is
not be a
from
picture from
the-
yesterday.
No, it's a fake protest.
That's a fake. That's a
Oh, Kinner's dropping fake protest.
Kenner. That was a
pictures.
fake picture.
Wow.
The picture that I had was the real picture.
So they have tried it before.
Tomorrow,
This is
the
the 0-16 parade.
16 parade. Well, is it? We're done. Have a good day, everybody. Until tomorrow. This has been Off the Bench. Presented by-
Adios.
I should have sent the picture of the Cavs parade
That's what you should
that
have
everybody
done.
uses. That's the one I should have used. If I was going to use a wrong picture, I might as well have used that one. I would love to say that I didn't get got. I got. So,
You tried. You tried to defend yourself, and it didn't work.
but there was way more people than 3. There was way more people than the 3 that you saw.
I'll wait till I see.
Well, actually, there was only 2. So I hate to bring that number down even more, but there was only 2 people there. So.
Here's the deal.
With cameras
moving forward. We were talking during the break, and I'm like, what's wild is I risked the future of the show and my future with Chatterbox and the relationship with Elliott and everybody throwing a temper tantrum about, I don't even remember. It was Browns related. I was defending their honor. And now I should have just waited a few weeks, and then that segment would have gone a lot different. You know how it would have gone? That's a great point, Elliott. That's
a beautiful smirk.
Like, yes, I love that smirk. That's a beautiful smile you have.
Thank you.
Like I want that portrait hung up in my home. Jacob, that's a great point. The Browns do stink. That's a great point. The organization is where quarterbacks and defensive tackles and running backs and wide receivers and coaches all go to die. Yeah, that's a great point. I've never thought of it like that. That segment would have gone so differently had this just been pushed up the timeline a little bit.
Yeah.
Tit for tit.
Do you want to throw it?
Tomorrow?
The thing is,
for old time's sake?
I'll throw it across the room right now. I don't give a damn.
Quote from Hubert Davis, something we pay attention to here in Cincinnati. He said, the old model of Carolina basketball just does not work. It's not sustainable.
Interesting.
Could the new model of North Carolina basketball be Wes Miller?
Whoa. Listen.
Just trying
now.
to save you $10 million here.
Wait a minute.
Just
Yes.
trying to save you $10 million.
I'll answer that right now. Yes.
Okay.
I think there might be a chance here that Wes Miller takes his talent back to North Carolina. Roy Williams has gone to like 15 different Bearcats games.
Yeah, I saw him in the UC Polo.
Every time he shows up, they lose.
Well, is that because he's there, or is that because they lose them all?
No, that's because they lose them all.
Gotcha.
And then he's also there for the losers. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. But, what a season it's been. The Reds sucked. The Bengals sucked. The Bearcats sucked at both sports that I watch. So who knows? Let's get hot.
Is there a third Bearcat sport you could pick up that they're successful at?
Some
baseball, softball,
no, some Bearcats
lacrosse.
No, we don't have the men's soccer team anymore. I think most Bearcats fans, their other Bearcat sport is rooting against Xavier. I'm not like that.
Okay.
I don't do that. Other Bearcats fans will. I'm not like that. I do not avidly root against Xavier. I don't care. Here's what I do. When my teams all suck like this, I'm gonna start getting really into the Oscars. So I'm gonna go all in on the Oscars this year, and I'm gonna watch all the Best Picture nominations, and that's what we'll do. That's how we'll solve this.
Better than the Grammys, Beyonce winning.
Noted country artist Beyonce.
Yeah,
Grammys.
I was outraged. Anti-Grammys.
I just don't watch out of all the award shows, the Grammys is by far the one I don't watch ever. Like I don't think I've ever watched it. Actually, now that I think about it.
Once I found out you could just Google it an hour later and see who won, I thought about watching it for.
Correct.
Kind of like sports and
Exactly like sports. But
Exactly.
the weird thing that I care about is sports, not award shows. Everyone has a weird thing they care about.
That's right. Remember
By the way,
remember when the ESPYs were fun? I used to
The
watch.
ESPYs were the
used to
only
love the
award show
ESPYs.
I'd watch every year.
I remember when Seth Meyers used to host the ESPYs. It was my favorite time of the year. It was so good. Now
yeah,
nobody
I mean,
cares about the ESPYs.
you tuned in to cry at any of those awards, especially of course. I hated that, nonetheless. But now I hate the ESPYs. I don't watch the ESPYs at all. I don't find it entertaining at all. I used to watch it all the time.
Oh yeah, I haven't turned on the ESPYs in 10 years, but whenever Seth Meyers used to host, I'd watch every single one. It was fantastic. There's a couple good bits too. Justin Timberlake would sing songs sometimes. It was very funny, very good.
So Hubert Davis, you brought him up. They put out a thing the other day saying that they are looking for they're going to have a general manager moving forward, and everyone's like, great, that'll go very well for next year's head coach of North Carolina, whoever the hell that would be. Because
Yeah,
I don't know, North Carolina, I don't understand what's going on.
Every school, every sport should have a GM. If you don't have a GM in college sports at this point, you are well behind. That is an absolute must for any school that wants to compete in this era. You have to have a GM, and he has to be good at his job. You can't just phone that position in anymore like you could in the past. That is absolutely crucial. So the fact that North Carolina basketball doesn't have one yet is honestly crazy.
Real quick, I was going to say this Myles Garrett thing too. This just got tweeted out a little bit ago that the ongoing, obviously requesting the trade, that the key date, the next date that is important to keep an eye on for what can kind of give an indicator of what the Browns are going to do is March 15th. He's due a $5 million bonus on that date. If he's on the team with an unchanged contract, he likely stays for 2025. I know we're going to touch more on that tomorrow. But yeah, all these weird little dates for these little bonuses and all that stuff too kind of speeds some of that up as far as what they want to do. Either way, I saw CBS Sports had the Bengals on the list as a possible landing spot. Like, this isn't me against the Bengals here, but like, the Browns do a lot of dumb things, but sending him to someone within the division would be the absolute most ridiculous, almost as ridiculous as thinking that the Bengals would actually put any trade package together to get him. We just literally did that most shocking trade thing a little bit ago, and then all just kind of realized, although we all knew it, and there is no shocking trade that the Bengals have ever pulled off. They don't attempt to make a splash through the trade market with that. So, yeah, there's 0% chance of that happening. I just thought it was interesting. CBS Sports put out a graphic of teams that most likely could land Myles Garrett. The Bengals were one of them. I was like, there's no way. Absolutely no way.
I saw the Bengals were in the top 5 for Cooper Kupp and Kyle Pitts as well. So it's going to be a big offseason for the Bengals. You extend Jamar, you trade for Cooper Kupp, you extend T, you extend Trey Hendrickson, you trade for Myles Garrett.
That's why these projections. It's why these projections don't mean anything.
Let's just have a Steelers offseason, but actually sign the people we're linked to.
Would be great.
That'd be really.
That'd be fun.
What did you think of the Kyle Pitts one though? Because I don't think that's a terrible. Again, it goes back to the Bengals.
This is Kyle Pitts' #1 fan.
I'm a big Kyle Pitts guy.
I think he stinks, and nobody's been able to figure him out. So if he wants to come to Cincinnati for cheap, then sure, I'll take anybody, literally at the tight end position.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a realistic option.
Is Gesicki back next year?
I would be absolutely shocked if Gesicki's not back next year. Something that was a little bit interesting. T. Higgins posted a picture of Mike Gesicki, Bengals uniform, one of his posts from this past year on his Instagram story a couple days ago. Or earlier today, maybe late last night. I saw it this morning. So just two guys that are free agents at the top of the list of people to return, posting about each other in Bengals uniforms. Who knows? Maybe exciting stuff.
If T is gone and Gesicki's there, obviously he got a lot of play. I mean, he got a lot more wide receiver looks than he did tight end looks this past season. Do you change the usage of Gesicki? Because not going to lie, down the stretch in those games T wasn't there, his production started to increase as the season went on, not being used as much in that tight end position.
I bet if he were to come back, I think they would try to go to him more as wide receiver 3. Because the beginning of the season, I think they were trying to figure out what the offense was. T. Higgins wasn't there. Jamar Chase was dealing with whatever he was dealing with at the beginning of the season. And I think right when, I don't know, was that week 4 or 5, Mike Gesicki really started to come on. And I would venture to say that he should line up more as wide receiver next season, just because we know what we've got there. We got a consistent pass-catching option opposed to, no disrespect, Drew Sample, who does nothing.
Yeah, I think that Mike Gesicki's a pretty crucial piece to return, just so you don't have to ask for a lot more out of Yoshivas or anything like that. But I think if T. Higgins leaves, the Bengals are taking a wide receiver in the first round or trading for someone that's really, really good.
They should.
There is no way they're going into next season with Jamar Chase as their 1 and Andre Yoshivas as their 2, or Mike Gesicki in this sense as their 2. That's what I think a lot of people are forgetting or discounting or saying isn't necessary, but that's what the Bengals would do. If you let T walk, you're taking someone at 17. This
is why I make this argument. And this is what I agree with you 100%. If we're all saying that if our intention is to let T. Higgins walk, then our number 1 priority this year would then be to replace T. Higgins.
Right.
Why not just bring T. Higgins back?
A lot of people are saying you don't need 2 wide receivers. I think they haven't watched enough Bengals football.
I agree. The logic doesn't make sense. If you lose T. Higgins, you absolutely have to draft a wide receiver with your first pick this year. And then, but you can negate all of that by just bringing him back. So why not just bring him back and we'll just help the defense with the number 1 pick? I don't get it.
And I know you and Craig, obviously, sort of as we get closer to the draft, everyone right away says, well, if T goes, you replace him with that first-round pick, of course. But, what does – and I don't know if you guys have taken a look at this because I haven't. When we talk about free agency, we constantly do the Cooper Kupp. We go big every time, right?
Sure.
But even with the Reds, we've learned – we're not talking about Juan Soto heading into free agency. Hey, the Reds, they're going to add additions. We don't even go that route. So let's not go that route with Cooper Kupp. It's usually we're pretty realistic if the guys that the Reds could financially target or it fits what they do. Have you taken a look at all, Jake, of any of the free agent wide receivers, like those mid-level guys like Mike Williams last year, like those level of wide receivers that make sense for Cincinnati based on how they operate? Maybe not make sense as far as what's best, but based on how they operate, like those level of wide receivers, could you see that being something that they go get to be wide receiver 2 and then get a receiver later in the draft and not use it for their first round?
Yeah, the players in that mid-level, I mean, Tyler Boyd signed a 1-year deal with Tennessee. You're looking to bring him back? I don't think a lot of those guys do what you want to do if you let T. Higgins walk. You have Brandon Cooks, Deontay Johnson, DeAndre Hopkins on a 1-year deal in Kansas City. I don't think any of those guys are worth bringing in on a 1-year deal or a mid-level deal. I think if you let T. Higgins walk, in all honesty, you're looking at the Chris Godwin level, the Keenan Allen level of a replacement receiver at free agency. I think you're spending almost $20 million on a free agent, and T. Higgins you're saving 8, 6 at that point, which is why I think the conversation is just so easy. The other component of that would be taking someone later in the draft, not using number 1, and using your 3rd or 4th round pick on a wide receiver. But once you get down there, that's a lot of risk. That's a lot of risk to draft someone in the 3rd or 4th round and ask them to be your wide receiver 2 when you're trying to win a Super Bowl. So I don't think that's a route the Bengals would go. I do think it's either extending T. Higgins, using pick 17, or trading for someone that is a relatively bigger name. And I'm not necessarily saying Cooper Kupp, the one I keep throwing out there just because it makes sense monetarily and the organizations have a relationship, is Calvin Ridley in Tennessee. I think that level of player is kind of where the Bengals would look if they let T. Higgins walk. People in the chat spamming all caps saying you don't need 2 elite wide receivers. Again, I would just say you haven't watched enough of the Bengals and Zach Taylor's offense, because it doesn't work without 2 elite wide receivers. If the Bengals were going to let T. Higgins walk and use a different scheme and change the offense, they should have fired Zach Taylor and went about it that way. But since Zach Taylor is still the coach, you absolutely do need 2 elite wide receivers in this offense, or you at least need 2 very good wide receivers in this offense. And if you don't have that, it won't look pretty.
Amari Cooper, the Bills, that was just a one. I mean, he's going to be available too. Like, where does that name fall in a list of guys that would make sense? Based on what I saw this past year, I don't think it makes sense at all. But if there's something left in the tank.
Here's where I'll give you some kudos, Kinner. Hand up, I was wrong about that one. I thought Amari Cooper was going to be better in Buffalo. He didn't fit that offense at all. It wasn't involved in that offense at all. I don't want Amari Cooper on the Bengals. I'm all good there. I think he's had a great career. It's a shame with how it ended, given the last year or so. But I think that story's been written, unfortunately.
I've never seen a receiver drop off that quickly. And I'm not saying there's not another people out there, but he went from 1,300 yards to what I thought was, the Browns' offense was so bad to start the season, even though he led the league in drops. I kept saying that at the beginning, hey, it's Deshaun, yes, but he's also dropping wide open. And there was opportunities to win games during that losing streak where he dropped first downs in field goal range that would have put the Browns in position to win some of these games. He led the league in drops at that point. And then his first game with Buffalo, I think he had like 68 yards and a touchdown. And I'm like, of course, it was Cleveland. They screwed it up. But then he was horrible the rest of the way.
Yeah, he was bad.
Wasn't good. So
I'm shocked too because they desperately needed a wide receiver, and he was
they
there.
gave him a third rounder.
Yeah, he was there. I mean, he showed up every single week, and I don't know what the most amount of catches. I'm gonna look this up real quick. This is how we'll end the show. I don't know what the most amount of catches he had in a game this year for him. It was 6 against the Rams in the game where they scored like 400 points combined. He had 6 catches for 95 yards. Outside of that, 1 catch versus the Patriots, 3 versus the Jets, 2 versus the Broncos. Didn't play versus the Ravens, or 0 catches versus the Ravens, 4 versus the Chiefs. Just didn't do anything down the stretch. So I don't get that at all.
All right, well, that wraps it up for us here today. Appreciate for those who are left watching as we wrap this up. Can you guys just hit that like button on the way out? We'd really appreciate that. Any additional likes to wrap up the show today, we appreciate that. Just kind of helps grow everything. So appreciate you guys. Until tomorrow, this has been Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Guys, do you have box lunch or anything coming up? Chatterbox Bengals, anything special coming up?
Nope.
Nothing on the horizon today.
So see you tomorrow.
Adios.